Well, good afternoon and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly call-in town hall and radio show. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase, your weekly radio town hall host. And it's great to be back with you all. This is my first update since completing our 2018 legislative session, which was ended this past Saturday, March the 10th. And I'm sorry I missed you all Friday night, but we had a long day on Friday and then had to be back early Saturday morning. And it worked out great that ODU won their game. So I got to spend a little bit of time at home preparing for Saturday. So as many of you know, for the past 60 days, from the second week in January until this past Saturday, my legislative colleagues and I have been working for you at the state capitol in Richmond. And today I thought I would just give you a rundown of some of the top issues that came up in the General Assembly and talk to you a little bit about my bills and finally give you an update on the Transparency Caucus. So you're going to want to stay tuned today. Again, I always want to thank my very dear friends at WNTW 820 AM, The Answer, and 97.7 FM for the opportunity to provide this free public service to you each week. And it's great to have Richard Lee back. It was great to see him in the studio today, and he looks great. And I know Scott's glad to have him back. And thank God for answering our prayers because, boy, it's never fun whenever you have a friend or a brother that's not doing so great. So he's looking great and feeling great, and so great to have him back. So if you have any questions about today's topic, we're going to be talking about a number of things. I'm going to be talking about a number of things, but you feel free to call in anyway, and that number is 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366. And I'm going to give you a little overview, but feel free to call in if you have any specific questions that you want to ask. And I hope you all found it very helpful that you could go to virginiageneralassembly.gov for the first time in Virginia's legislative history and actually go in and watch us in action in our committee meetings, which is where most of the work gets done during our legislative session. So I hope you all will continue to take advantage of that. And if you missed it, you can actually go back and watch it. So the final week of the regular session of the 2018 General Assembly, we saw agreements reached on dozens of bills, and I will tell you, this has probably been the best session I've had so far. I had 11 bills to pass, the House and the Senate. They're waiting on the governor's desk, and I'm going to be optimistic and say he's going to sign most of them. Hope he's listening. And an agreement on one very important bill was not reached, however, and that's the budget, and you've probably been listening and hearing about that in the news. And since the bill on which an agreement was not reached would fund Virginia's government for the next 2 years, unfortunately, our work is still not done. So I'm going to get to go back. Yay. April the 11th is when we're going to be going back. It's on a Wednesday. And the failure to reach a budget agreement was not entirely unexpected. I mean, if you look at the two budgets, they are widely different, over $3 billion. And I know we're hearing different numbers out there. But in 4 of the 5 previous years, when the General Assembly adjourned without a budget agreement, the differences between the House and the Senate plans was not just how the money was spent, but how much money was spent. And this year, there is an enormous gap. It's over $3 billion between what the Senate and the House budget spend. And so if you can't agree on how much money you have to spend, guess what? That's right. You're going to have a really tough time agreeing on how much to spend. So this disagreement has resulted in an impasse. The underlying issue is whether or not to implement Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, and has created a gulf between the two spending plans. The Senate plan, which I call the skinny budget, is based on money the state actually has. What a novel concept. While the House's plan is dependent upon federal funding from a program that, guess what, the Trump administration has pledged to end. So my fellow Republican senators and I did everything possible to keep the session going to try to reach an agreement. First, we voted to extend the session by 30 days. as permitted by the Constitution of Virginia. But we needed 2/3 of the senators to vote for that extension, and none of the Democrats would go along with that. So we tried something else. The next thing we did is we voted to extend the session for just 3 days. And again, the Democrat senators voted no. I think they thought we were up to something, but we really weren't. We really weren't. We were just trying to get our work done. And it was Saturday, right? So that was the last day. So without an agreement to extend the session, the Constitution requires that we adjourn the session. And now we are going to be going into something called special session, which the governor called, to complete work on the budget on Wednesday, April the 11th. And this means that senators and delegates who are assigned the challenging task of reaching an agreement will continue to meet. And those are the budget conferees that we talked about 2 weeks ago. And all legislators will be returning to Richmond once an agreement is reached. And it is too soon to tell whether this process is going to take days or weeks or months. But guess what? The new budget, whatever it is going to have to go into effect July 1. So we got to get it done. The two most recent budget impasses that were based on large disagreements on revenues and spending lasted until June. Ultimately, the new budgets were completed days before the old ones expired. And we avoided government shutdowns those years, and I'm hoping we're going to avoid one this year too. So that's kind of where we are right now. And, the last person I had the opportunity to speak with when I left session on Saturday was Mr. Speaker, Speaker Cox. And, we just chatted about a number of different things. But, he's in a really hard position right now. And I understand that. And let me help you to understand why. First of all, Virginia House and Senate, they have starkly different budgets, and we all know that. And there are a lot of different things there, but more than a dozen House Republicans abandoned their long-standing positions to expansion, teaming up with Democrats to include in their 2-year spending plan, which will take effect, as we said, July 1. And that approach was backed by one of my favorite people, House Speaker Kirk Cox, but rejected by the rest of the House GOP leadership. And would not only tap federal funds to provide health care to as many as 400,000 uninsured Virginians, but would also allow the state to take more than $420 million currently devoted to health care and spend it on other priorities. On the other side of the Capitol, the Republican-controlled Senate, we stood more firmly than ever against expansion. And people, they're just scratching their heads because it's usually the senators that are a little out of hand. In the years in the past before my freshman class came in, there were 8 of us. The Republican senators that were in place here were more likely to support Medicaid expansion than those that were replaced. So that's what you have going on here. So we probably have the most conservative state Senate in Virginia's history. And people who have been watching Virginia politics for years just don't seem to get this. And they seem so surprised when the Senate is actually the backstop to this Medicaid expansion, but it's happening so far. And so, I'm going back here to the House. Now, keep in mind that the House passed its budget on a 68-32 vote, with 19 Republicans joining all 49 House Democrats in support. Speaker Cox, who assumed the speakership this year, was once staunchly opposed Medicaid expansion, but softened his stance after Democrats nearly won control of the chamber in state elections last fall. And he said that he would accept expansion if the work requirements, co-pays, and other strings were attached. Now, in the House, Republican support for expansion was limited, with more than half of the 51-member Republican caucus voting against it. Even so, what GOP support was there represented an abrupt about-face in a chamber that has vigorously opposed expansion for the past 4 years. And honestly, I'm proud of our GOP leadership for kind of standing up and saying, we're not doing the right thing in this situation. I've spoken to Speaker Cox, who I deeply respect, and said, look, this is not good for our district. It's not good for you. And even Delegate Landis explained his opposition to expansion, saying it made him sad to vote against the wishes of Cox Appropriations Committee Chairman Delegate Appropriations Committee Chairman Delegate Chris Jones and Delegate Terry Kilgore. And so, there's a split in our leadership right now. But Delegate Landis said it was the first time he'd ever voted against a budget in his 23 years in the House. And, so here we are. Now, I think, in all honesty, Speaker Cox feels that the Senate, and remember, he's worked with the Senate for a number of years, in his heart of hearts believes that there are going to be some Republican senators who could potentially, support this Medicaid expansion, even though we've said we're not. And so he wants to make sure as Speaker that he is not only a budget conferee, because in order to be one, you have to support this option. And so he wants to be able to negotiate a more conservative budget than if there were no conservatives sitting as budget conferees. So it is a strategy to, I guess he feels like it's impending, it's looming, it could happen. And so, his thought is, if that happens, I want to be there to negotiate a more conservative budget. So that's where we are with that. And I still have respect for Speaker Cox. I just disagree with him on that issue. So it's complicated. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about my bills, and then we'll probably go back and talk about the budget. And so stay tuned. We'll be right back with Cut to the Chase.
This Sunday morning, from 11 a.m. till noon, you're invited to join the congregation of Community Bainbridge Baptist Church, 1101 Bainbridge Street in Richmond, for their Sunday morning worship service. You'll hear an inspiring message from the pastor, Dr. Mike McClary. That's this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. on AM 820 WNTW, where you find the answer.
Why do I have a problem with millennials? I'm sick and tired of hearing the word, and I'm sick and tired of catering to them, and I'm sick and tired of hearing what they think, because they don't think. All they do is spew the data that they get off an iPhone or what's been put into their silly little heads in the public schools.
Tune in to the Savage Nation weekdays here on Richmond's Choice for Conservative Talk Radio, WNTW 820 AM and 97.7 FM. The Answer.
Well, good afternoon and welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly call-in town hall and radio show. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase, your weekly radio town hall host, and love to have you all call in if you'd like, 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366. I want to start off by talking about some of the bills that I was chief patron for that actually passed the session, and thank you, Lord, for the success that I had this year. I had 11 bills to pass. Several of those I was the co-patron on. But Senate Bill 20, it's called the Red Tape Reduction Commission. And I joke around with the Lee brothers and tell them this is their bill. And what it is the commission, it was created, it's a review of regulatory requirements. It's a pilot program that creates a 3-year regulatory reduction pilot program. And it's going to be administered by the Department of Planning and Budget. And it is focused on 2 departments that have all kinds of regulatory requirements. That would be the Department of Professional and Occupational Licensing, and all of you who had to apply with the state to get some type of professional license or raising your hand, and the Department of Criminal Justice Services. And between those 2 departments, they produce about 40% of all those regulatory requirements that are cumbersome and just create a hassle for you when you have to go to any type of state agency to get help. And the goal is to reduce regulatory requirements, compliance cost, and regulatory burden across agencies by 25% by July 1st of 2021. And the good news is that it passed the Senate, it passed the House, and the governor has said that he's going to sign this. So I'll have a bill. If you're interested in attending a bill swearing in or bill ceremony, sometimes that happens. You can contact my office and come watch a bill be signed into law. That'll be fun. So that's really good. Not so good is my Senate Bill 715, which allows EMS, emergency medical services, and firefighters to utilize their concealed carry permit rights with the permission of their chief or county, if applicable. And you would have similar training to that of a fire marshal. And unfortunately, this bill, so it passed the Senate. It passed through a House subcommittee, made it all the way to the floor of the House, and they passed it by for several days. And I thought, what in the world is going on over there? So I called my friend, Delegate Nick Freitas, and asked him, what's going on? And he said, I think there's some issues with Section D, which has to do with the Department of Criminal Justice Services and the Department of EMS. There are some concerns that, maybe this is going to be more restrictive. And so I said, well, just amend it and get rid of it. If it's causing a problem and it's going to be restrictive, just cut it out. Well, what happened was there was a group of firefighters that came out and opposed it. It's interesting. It seems like the administrative agencies don't like the bill, the firefighters and the EMS, but the rank and file firefighters, the guys that are on the grounds, they do like this because, they're the ones that are having to go into harm's ways, like these shootings that are coming up frequently, and a lot of them are volunteers, and they're coming to me and they're saying, Senator Chase, please do something. We just want to be able to carry our firearms as a way to protect ourselves because, they're told to stand back until it's safe for them to go in, and they want to go and save people. But, if especially these volunteer firefighters, these volunteer EMS folks, they want to go in and save us. But, we've and nowadays, we've got to allow them to carry so they can protect themselves. And what this bill does, they can currently do that, by the way. But what my bill would have allowed them to do was carry in places where it's forbidden by law, like in our state buildings, in schools. If they happen to have their firearm concealed carry on them now, and they were to accidentally, responding to an emergency, and they had their firearm, and it's attached, it's secure, it's not going to fall off. Or I've heard all kinds of interesting arguments from the left saying why this would be a bad idea. But anyway, so this provides that any firefighter or person employed as emergency medical services personnel with a concealed carry permit, they may carry a concealed handgun throughout the Commonwealth while engaged in their official duties. So they would have to be engaged in their official duties, provided that such firefighter or person employed as emergency services personnel has been approved to carry a concealed handgun by his or her fire chief or emergency medical services chief. Now, originally, the bill said that the Department of Criminal Justice Services, in consultation with the Office of Emergency Medical Services of the Department of Health and the Department of Fire Programs, shall develop a model policy regarding carrying a concealed handgun for firefighters and emergency medical services personnel. So any decision by a fire chief or EMS chief that authorizes an employee or volunteer to carry a concealed handgun while engaged in the performance of his official duties is reviewable by the local elected governing body. So it was giving the local elected governing body, unless the fire chief or the emergency medical services chief is employed by a private entity. And it's interesting because you have the local fire and EMS, and then you also have private EMS. And I will tell you that firefighters and EMS can actually carry right now. They can do this right now. However, I know that some of our how would you say this? Our fire chiefs that are in more suburban areas are opposed to this. They have more access to, the police. are come a little bit quicker, I guess, for them than those who are in rural areas. Like I have Amelia in Colonial Heights, and I've actually had the fire chiefs for Amelia and Colonial Heights to support my bill, and in Chesterfield there was not the support. So there you have it. So I'm gonna take a look at that bill again. And, let me know what you think. Give me a call, 804-454-1366, and let me know. Do you think that would you be okay with your fire and EMS being able to conceal carry? I mean, they already can, but should they be able to go into state buildings? Should they be able to go into schools if they're responding to a situation? Let me know what you think. So another bill that I had that did pass, Senate Bill 912. Now, how many of you are retired law enforcement officers out there? You can raise your hands. Some of you will decide you're going to return to work. But what happens is, or what was happening is, there was a situation where when a retired law enforcement officer retires, he gets to keep his badge and can continue to conceal carry. However, if he returned back to work in any type of administrative capacity, they would have to give it up. And that was never the intention. That was never the intention of the bill. So we want to make sure that whenever they, return back to work, that they can still use their badge, even though they've retired, that they can still carry. That bill passed the House and the Senate and is waiting for the governor's signature, and I think that's one that he will sign. Well, it's already time to go to a break. So when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about a couple of other bills that you might be interested in. One pertaining to eminent domain. If those of you who are personal property rights supporters like myself, you'll want to stay tuned. We'll be right back with Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase.
Lately, I've been losing sleep.
All right, we're back on Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly call-in town hall. I'm not as entertaining as the Lee brothers, but hopefully you find this informative. The number here is 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366. But hopefully you get a lot of good information, right? So the next bill I want to talk about, I introduced a bill. It's Senate Bill 809. And it has to do with eminent domain. And you're like, what in the world is that? It's a property rights bill. It's for farmers and businesses. Right now, farms and businesses that suffer a partial take, in other words, if the government comes in and takes part of your land for a road project, for instance. And so if they just take part of the land, it's called a partial take. So right now, farmers and businesses that suffer a partial take can receive 3 years of just compensation for lost profits if they lose their property. And a whole take, meaning they take the entire property in eminent domain cases, but in whole take, so I'll get this out, whole takes, victims receive only 1 year of lost profits, and partial take victims receive 3 years of lost profits. And that doesn't make any sense. So you're saying that if I lose my entire property, I'm going to get compensated for 1 year, and if you only take part of it, like a couple feet, I'm going to get 3 years? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Well, I didn't think it made sense either. So condemning authorities currently have the incentive to take whole properties, right? Including slivers of land that they don't need in order just to avoid paying for 3 years lost profits on a partial take. This bill was endorsed by the Farm Bureau, NFIB, and the Virginia Forestry. And I actually worked on this bill with Senator Peterson. He had the same bill. We had the same idea. We also worked together on some Dominion and utility regulation on the rate freeze. And I appreciate Senator Peterson. I actually rolled my bill into his because he is a property rights attorney. And I thought, well, we'll let him continue with this bill. As long as it gets done, who cares who gets the credit? And I am happy to say that bill has passed the Senate, it has passed the House, and it is now waiting on the governor's signature. So that one will probably be signed as well. My Senate Bill 106 also was combined. This is have y'all heard about the gerrymandering, congressional and state legislative districts? So what this bill is, it was a redistricting bill that was intended to get rid of gerrymandering. And I was trying to lead the cause. And Senator Suderline, Senator Sturdivant, Senators Howell, Senators Vogel, all of us ended up, our bills were combined and put into Senate Bill 706. And our hope is to basically put an end to this gerrymandering. It provides criteria for the General Assembly to observe in drawing districts, including a couple things. It had different things. First of all, I want to say I'm okay with the General Assembly drawing the lines. Do you know why? Because you are the ones that elect those people. And you don't want them to appoint bureaucrats that can hide and not be accountable to you, the people. You also want to know their political stripe. And I will tell you, there is no such thing as a nonpartisan group. You don't know what it is. And for me, that's not transparency. I want to know the political stripe of the person that's drawing those lines. And so by having an elected official, it is someone who is elected by you, the people, and it's transparent because you know where they stand politically. And believe me, the only people that know how to draw those lines are people who are political. So don't buy anything else. So there are a couple things that included this bill. It said, okay, General Assembly, you are going to be required to draw these lines. However, you have to do it under a couple conditions. First of all, you have to show respect for political boundaries. Now, I don't mean Republicans and Democrats. We're talking about boundaries of cities and counties. That's what we're talking about when we say political boundaries. You also have to make sure there's equal population. There's racial and ethnic fairness. We have to go by two major laws, the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution and also the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. We have to stay under that federal jurisdiction. We also have to take into account compactness of a district and contiguity. And we also have to take a look at, are these communities of interest? Now, it does prohibit the use of political data or election results. So no more, I can't go in and draw my opposition out of that seat. There's no more of that allowed. No more of those finger-like tendrils which go down and, pull out one particular person that you don't want to run against. You can't do that anymore. And so that bill has passed the Senate and the House and is waiting for the governor's signature. So pretty happy about that too. The other bill I wanted to talk about that has passed the House and the Senate is waiting on the governor's signature is Senate Bill 717. And I introduced this bill on behalf of some independent insurance agents. And this bill requires that insurance companies include the commission data to the Bureau of Insurance when requesting rate increases. Okay, before you tune out, let me tell you what this is. We have some people in our district who sell health insurance, okay? They're small business owners. And this is a transparency bill that allows small business owners, it allows them to know what they're going to get paid before they do the work and then don't get paid. Can you believe that's actually happening right now? The Virginia law prohibits an agent from being paid any commission that is not included in the premium. So how can the Bureau of Insurance enforce this, and how can agents know premium filings? Can't believe we're already going to break, but we are. When we come back, I'm going to tell you exactly what's happened here, but we corrected this situation, and so now they're going to know that they're going to get paid. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. This is our weekly call-in town hall and radio show. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase, your weekly radio town hall host. And the number here is 804-454-1366, 804-454-1366, fresh off of session, which finished last Saturday, and talking about some of the bills that I patroned that are actually going to have actually already passed the House and the Senate and are on the governor's desk, hopefully going to be signed. So there are close to 30,000 Virginians who have a health insurance license. They are small business owners in your community, and you might even be one. Well, they have recently been experiencing dramatic and last-minute changes, and the compensation levels from the health plans, sometimes going from straight commission or commission per contract to no compensation whatsoever. The thing that gets me is that they didn't even know about this until actually they had done the work. And then they're like, wait, what? I'm not going to get paid. I've already done the work. See, I just have a problem with that. I know you do too. So Senate Bill 717 requires health plans to specifically report their anticipated agent commission structure along with their annual rate filing to the Bureau of Insurance. I mean, let's let them know on the front end what they're going to get paid, their commission rate, right? So they can make a decision, am I going to sell more life insurance? Am I going to sell more car insurance? I mean, these guys have to eat, right? And if you're commission only, you're going to spend your time on how you're going to be able to make money for your family. So anyway, I'm glad that bill passed the House and the Senate. It was the right thing to do, and I hope the governor will sign that bill as well. So, wow, there are a number of here. Let's flip over to, let's see, what are some other bills that I had here? Looking through my notes here. We had, flip over here. There were 11 bills. Have I already gone through all 11 bills? I think I might have actually today. So let's talk about, I'm going to switch topics here to the Dominion rate freeze, which is another piece of legislation that has been a focus this session, which came up to a culmination the last 2 weeks of session. And they were known as the Dominion rate freeze bills. I actually co-patroned a bill with Senator Peterson that was killed one of the first weeks in session. And I think it's very important that the State Corporation Commission, which regulates our utility companies, it gives them more oversight. I just sometimes I see things from a different perspective. I don't see myself as a politician. I know that I am, and some of you will say, well, you are. But I just feel like a lot of you all don't trust us with that. And so I recognize that, and I just feel like this bill would give more control back to the State Corporation Commission. Anyway, while some of us work to enforce a rate review restoration and customer refunds, another view allowed for potential refunds and expanding the grid with renewables and investment in grid infrastructure. And there was a lot of discussion in both chambers, which resulted in amendments and substitutes to the various pieces of legislation. And just to give you an idea what that means, like if you have an original piece of a bill and you'll get input from it and you can decide to make a line amendment, which means you just change something small in that bill, or you can have a complete substitute, which means you're basically gutting the bill and putting more information in there. So it's very important that you inform yourself on how to follow these bills and make sure that you are aware of any changes that are made to that bill, because you may originally be opposed to it, but they make changes so you're supportive of that. And I've tried to educate people on that process, because sometimes I know I get the Tea Party list and the Family Foundation list, and a lot of these groups will send us lists, and then the bills change and people are still opposing it when it's okay later on. So anyway, maybe we'll have an educational show on how all that works. So ultimately, the final product of Senate Bill 966 and House Bill 1558 allowed Dominion a couple things: the potential of keeping over earnings and reinvesting them in the grid rather than returning those refunds to customers. Now, I found out that the total refunds was going to be like a couple dollars a month for like 6 months, which is not really a lot of money, but it is to some people. But the final bills, although denying Dominion the potential to double dip, which was one of my concerns, my concern was I didn't want them to say, well, you're not only not going to get your refund, but we're going to take these investments that we're making in renewables and we're going to build that back into the base rate. They're not doing that. Okay, so that's good. They eliminated that double dip. But they did not follow tight enough State Corporation Commission standards of accounting for reasonable and prudent expenditures, in my opinion, meaning, let's just talk about the coal ash expenditure, which we're still trying to get the numbers on. And I want the flexibility to, if there's a large number, which there probably will be, they're saying it could be $4 billion. I don't want Dominion to have the ability to expense that in 3 years, and then possibly you end up with a rate adjustment a rate adjustment clause on there where you're having to pay a lot more on your bill. I want them to be able to depreciate that expense over, 20 to 50 years so that it's not as much money. So I don't think Dominion should be allowed to pick how long a period of time they get to expense that coal ash in there. I think the State Corporation Commission can determine with the General Assembly's input how long a period of time that's going to be. Therefore, I voted against these bills with the hopes that we can work out legislation going forward. Right now, it's actually at this point passed. This passed the House and the Senate. I did not vote for it. I did not support it. But I do feel that it's a better bill than it was originally. So that's where we are on that. One of the things that I want to talk about today, what you can do, because I know a lot of times we have action items on the show. Take a look at the legislators in the House, the Republicans in the House. There are 19 of them that voted for Medicaid expansion. And I'm going to ask you to give them a call and let them know that you don't think it's a good idea for us to expand Medicaid. I want you to give them a call. They need to hear from you because whenever we start back on April the 11th, we're going to have a fresh new budget. I hope that we can start with the Senate budget. That's what I would like to do. I would like for the conferees to come back and say, you know what, the people do not support Medicaid expansion. We need to go with the Senate budget and stick to that. So I want to talk about the private options. And there were several that Senate Republicans came up with because, everybody's like, what can we do? Well, I had lunch with a friend today, and they were talking about how they use direct primary care. And I said, guess what? I actually got to be a part of co-patroning that bill last year when it passed. It's so nice when you see work that you work so hard on and how it actually impacts people's life and their health care. So direct primary care, like Partner MD, is a good example. You can do that now. And it's a great option for people. But there are also private options. We had Senate Bill 844, and that would basically be short-term coverage plans to be offered for 364 days instead of the current 90 days. And that helps people who are in between jobs. And it would place requirements on health insurance companies to offer plans in more areas of the Commonwealth and allow less expensive short-term coverage plans to be offered for 364 days, again, instead of just the current 90 days. And remember, these are all private plans. Senate Bill 935 would expand the ability of group insurance plans, allowing more Virginians to participate in something called insurance pools. So let's just say you're a pastor and you find a group of pastors that would want to create a group insurance plan. You could do that under Senate Bill 935. Under Senate Bill 964, this is going to allow catastrophic health coverage plans, which provide essential health benefits, to be offered to more Virginians. Currently, such plans, which are significantly less expensive than other plans offered under the terms of the Affordable Care Act, are available to those under the age of 30, and this bill would remove the age limit and make the plans more widely available. Now, Senate Bill 915 is one I really want to talk about, and we've talked about it a little bit, but it would prioritize the funding of waivers for intellectually and developmentally disabled Virginians. Funding for these Priority 1 waivers, for which there is a current backlog and it exceeds 3,000, it has been a long-standing priority for Senate Republicans and has also increased mental health and substance abuse treatment. Remember, we talked about the 3,000 individuals that are currently on this plan, and this has nothing to do with a Medicaid expansion. It has to do with our current obligation under current Medicaid that we have not funded. And even in the House's budget, they only fund 850 of the 3,000. So we got to do better than that. If we're going to we're going to help people with their health care, at least do what you say you're going to do, right? All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to the final segment of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. And boy, we've covered a lot on the show. You know, Medicaid reform is needed, and I'm not going to deny that. It really is in need of some reform. But I personally think that we should use our current and existing budget to pay for and make good on our current obligations to those 2,500 to 3,000 individuals who've been waiting for help, and in some cases over 10 years. It is a promise the Commonwealth already made and one they should keep in good faith. But we should not, and I emphasize we should not, dilute this truly needy population with able-bodied people who can work, as the House has proposed. In the states which have expanded Medicaid, here's what happens. There are more people enrolled than they anticipated, and it costs twice as much as they thought that it would. Expanding Medicaid only leads to future tax increases and cuts to education, transportation, infrastructure, and public safety. And as a mother of 2 kids still in our public schools, no, we don't want to have cuts to education. The House ill-advisedly moved in this direction only a week after the Trump administration advised that they are making significant cuts in the budget to Medicaid. The president's plan for the federal budget doesn't just reduce funding for Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. It actually includes a multi-year phase-out of the program. The federal government has been working diligently to roll back the most expensive aspects of Obamacare, and they're doing so because the program is fiscally unsustainable. That's right. So Virginia already has a massive Medicaid spending problem, and that's even before we get started with any talks of Medicaid expansion. Medicaid costs are projected to rise, get this, nearly $300 million in Virginia through fiscal year 2018, consuming the largest share of available revenue, even with enrollment levels staying the same. Even without expanding Medicaid, Virginia is faced with unsustainable costs and a budget shortfall that is already straining available funds. Provider taxes are a risky way to fund Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, and that's one of the options. They're saying, let's put a hospital tax on these hospitals. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to pass that on to you. At the federal level, both Democrats and Republicans alike have already proposed cutting or eliminating provider taxes, such as the hospital tax, as a way to fund Medicaid. And in fact, New Hampshire recently received a letter from the Trump administration saying its scheme was illegal, forcing the state to find new ways to pay for its Obamacare Medicaid expansion. So even if the provider tax survives, it still may not cover Virginia's share of Medicaid expansion costs. And that's what they're saying doing. They're saying, hey, you know, this 10%, Virginia, that you have to pay, you're not going to have to pay that. We're going to let the hospitals pay for that for you. Federal law currently caps federal taxes at 6% of net patient revenue. And considering the massive over-enrollment and budget overruns in other states, provider tax revenues may not be enough. Considering these circumstances and the fiscal difficulties experienced by states that have expanded Medicaid, I personally think it would be fiscally irresponsible for Virginia to sign on to this unsustainable entitlement. And there you have it, folks. So, you know, I'm full of compassion. I feel my heart breaks whenever I see these health needs. But you really need to look at this up. Okay, Google search direct primary care Virginia. There is also in your community, there's something called HRSA health centers, community health centers. You can get care right now at a nearby community health center. And in fact, I did a Google search and I came up with the Bermuda Medical Center, which is on Bensley Commons Boulevard. And even if you have no health insurance, you pay what you can afford based on your income. So you should check that out. Stay tuned next Friday from 6 to 7 with Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. And we're going to continue to talk about the top issues that are affecting you in Virginia with State Senator Amanda Chase. We'll be back next Friday.